Very important area when putting together a tri-power is getting the fuel lines on correctly, because obviously you don't want any fuel leaks or fires. Um, in the past, you'll see a lot of rubber fuel lines on these. I see evidence of that, and a lot of them I get to restore, but obviously that's dangerous. So what I have here is a 65 tri-power. I have a set of new fuel lines and new fittings. I'm going to show you how it goes together. Just a word about the fittings. These fittings were always made by a company called Weatherhead, and I don't know if you can focus in on this, but you can see the W insignia on there. Weatherhead has been bought by another company called Eaton, so if you find some of the older reproduction fittings or the originals, they'll still be Weatherheads. These are a tapered fitting. They're 1/8" pipe threads, so sometimes or often really you need to replace the fittings because they wear out, as do the threads in the air horn. When the threads in the air horn wear out, you'll see that the fitting will sink all the way in, and you won't be able to tighten it. In that case, I can put it in, or you may find somebody to put an insert in the air horn here, so you'll have new threads. So I start by putting in the fittings. I put the front fuel block in and the 45-degree one in the center. The rear fitting is 105 degree, not a 90. You can get a 90 at a hardware store, but this is a reproduction item. Some of the cheaper fuel line sets give you the 90. The 105 kicks the fuel line, the rear fuel line, away from the float bowl and gives you a little more room to work. So I really recommend using that one. I've coated the threads here with a thin coat of Teflon paste. Never use Teflon tape on a tri-power. Shreds, little threads from shredding the tape can get in the needle and seat and just cause you a lot of trouble. So after you coat the threads, you'll notice too that the carburetors are all loose on the manifold. That's the way it should be as you're setting your lines up. That way you have a little wiggle room. So pretty easy then, just screw it in till it's good and tight. This one actually is screwing in further than I'd like, so I'll give you an example of one that probably needs a thread insert. So I'm going to stop right there. That's about the right angle. The fuel lines, I do a couple things too that may or not be necessary, but when they put the flare on, they make a little ridge in the fuel line, and it probably isn't necessary, but I file that ridge off until it's flat just to be safe. And the other thing I do, spray a little WD-40 on the back side of the flare, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. That way the fuel fitting slides easily on there. You'll see if you over tighten these, you'll ruin the flare, but you'll also start twisting the line, and this gives you a little more room to tighten it. And the fuel line should fit on pretty easily. I've kind of pre-fit these, so if it doesn't, you can aluminum, you can bend pretty easily. Usually start it in one end. In this case, this really should be tighter. I shouldn't be able to turn it with my fingers, but you get the idea. Brief here. This is typical though of trying to get them on. It's a little bit of manipulating you got to do to get everything just right. Just going to tighten this one to show you how it's done. Basically, you don't want to put a lot of pressure on the carburetors. You're tightening the fittings. This is 1/2 inch. I usually like to use a crescent wrench. Hold the brass fitting so that you're not putting pressure against the carburetor. Then tighten the bottom up. Basically, do the same thing with the other two. This is probably the most tricky one, but pre-fit it and then thread it on in. And don't be afraid to bend them. I'm not going to tighten those up because it's the same process as before. And then this one goes in the bottom down to the fuel pump. One thing I might mention that's confusing, this is the same fuel fitting for the 64 and 5 tri-power disc for the 66. And the 66, you just turn this another 180 degrees so that the fuel inlet really is up in the top, and then the people that are familiar with 66 know how the line goes from there.